$60,000. That's what the sticker said on a tri-toon sitting under fluorescent lights at a dealer outside Nashville. Beautiful boat. Teak vinyl flooring, a 12-inch touchscreen, LED accent lighting that made the whole thing glow like a spaceship. The salesman talked about the Bluetooth stereo for 10 minutes. He never once mentioned what was underneath the deck. So I asked if I could see the hull construction up close. He said there was nothing to see, but there was plenty to see, and what I found is why I walked off that lot without spending a dime. The dealer experience is designed to keep your eyes above the waterline. They want you sitting in the captain's chair, running your hand across the upholstery, imagining your family on the lake. The furniture, the layout, the cup holders, the speaker system. That's what they sell you. Nobody walks into a showroom and asks to see the underside of the deck or the inside of a pontoon tube. And the industry is counting on that, because underneath all that polish is where the real story lives. And for $60,000, you'd expect that story to be a good one. It wasn't. The first thing I looked at was the aluminum itself. Pontoon tubes come in different gauges, and gauge thickness is everything. The difference between 0.080-inch aluminum and 0.100-inch aluminum is the difference between a hull that flexes when you push on it and one that holds rigid under load. This boat was running 0.063-inch gauge on the outer tubes. That's the thinnest you'll find on a production pontoon. You can literally press your thumb into it and watch it give. The manufacturer saves roughly $400 per tube using thinner aluminum. On a tri-toon, that's $1,200 they kept. You'd never know unless you brought a micrometer to the dealership, and nobody does. Then I looked at the welds. A proper pontoon weld is a full penetration weld that fuses the aluminum all the way through the joint. What I saw on this $60,000 boat were cosmetic tack welds, little dabs of filler that look clean on the surface but don't bite deep into the base metal. I've seen this kind of welding on budget pontoons in the $15,000 range. Seeing it at this price point was something else entirely. Under stress, bouncing across waves at 25 miles per hour, season after season, tack welds crack. Full penetration welds don't. A skilled welder running full penetration joints takes longer and costs the manufacturer more per foot of seam. The visual difference on a finished boat is subtle. The performance difference over 5 years of actual use is not subtle at all. The crossmembers connecting the tubes to the deck frame were spaced every 24 inches. On a premium build, you'll see them every 16 inches. 8 inches doesn't sound like much until you're running across a choppy lake with 8 people on board and the deck is flexing under your feet. Fewer crossmembers means less material, less labor, and less structural integrity. The manufacturer probably saved $200 on the whole frame by spacing them wider. You'll spend $2,000 fixing the deck warping 3 years from now. I pulled up a section of the deck material next. This is the part that made me stop and just stare. On a $60,000 boat, you'd expect marine-grade plywood. What I found was a pressure-treated composite that looked suspiciously like the cheap particle board you'd find at a hardware store. Marine-grade plywood runs about $80 to $90 per sheet. The composite I was looking at costs roughly $30 per sheet. On a full pontoon deck, that material swap saves the manufacturer maybe $250 total. But here's the problem. That cheaper material absorbs moisture through every screw hole, every cut edge, every nick in the surface. Within 3 to 5 seasons, it starts rotting from the inside. You won't see it until the floor gets soft under your feet, and by then you're looking at a full deck replacement that costs more than some used boats. Inside the tubes, I asked about the foam fill. Manufacturers are required to have flotation foam in the pontoons for Coast Guard certification. Closed cell foam does not absorb water. It is the right choice, and it costs more. Open cell foam is cheaper, and it absorbs water like a sponge. Over time, your pontoon gains hundreds of pounds of water weight that you cannot see and cannot drain without cutting the tubes open. The salesman told me it was closed cell. He could not show me documentation. That is not a good sign. If you are getting something out of this, hit subscribe. I tear into boats and engines every week, so you know what the dealership will not tell you. Now let's talk about where they really cut costs, because it is not the stuff you can see. The wiring on this boat was standard copper automotive wire. On a $60,000 vessel that sits in water, you want tinned marine-grade wire. Tinned wire resists corrosion. Automotive wire turns green and brittle within 2 seasons in a marine environment. The price difference is roughly $3 to $4 more per foot for tin-ed wire. On an entire boat's wiring harness, the manufacturer saves maybe $150 by using the cheap stuff. You'll spend $800 to $1,200 rewiring it when your bilge pump, navigation lights, or fuel gauge starts failing. The fasteners told the same story. Zinc-plated steel bolts and screws instead of stainless steel. Zinc plating corrodes in salt water within a single season and in freshwater within about 18 months. Stainless costs roughly 3 times more per fastener. Across an entire pontoon, that's probably an extra $100 in materials. The manufacturer skipped it. So here's the math that made me walk away. The aluminum tubing, crossmembers, deck material, foam, wiring, fasteners, and basic hardware on this pontoon cost somewhere in the neighborhood of $4,000 to $6,000 in raw materials. Add fabrication labor, paint, and assembly, and you're probably looking at a total manufacturing cost between $8,000 and $12,000 for the hull and structure alone. The furniture, electronics, engine rigging, and cosmetics add more, obviously. But even being generous with overhead, freight, and dealer margin, the gap between what it costs to build and what they're charging is enormous. That gap is where the thinner aluminum, the cheap foam, the automotive wire, and the particle board deck live. They're not cutting those corners to survive. They're cutting them to widen the margin on a boat they already marked up significantly. Before you buy any pontoon, check 5 things. Run your hand along the underside of the tubes and feel for flex. Ask for the aluminum gauge in writing, not verbally, on the spec sheet. Get our nerd underneath the deck and identify the material yourself, because the salesman will call everything marine grade whether it is or not. Ask for documentation on the foam type and don't accept it meets Coast Guard standards as an answer, because open cell foam technically meets that standard too. And pull back a wiring cover and look for the tinned marine grade stamp on the insulation. If the dealer can't answer those questions or won't, do exactly what I did. Walk off the lot. The boat you don't buy is always cheaper than the one you have to fix.